Hey everyone, welcome to 3 Beers Deep for Monday, April 6, 2015. You may be watching this on YouTube, in which you're watching the video version of my weekly Q&A, in which you submit questions to patrickklepek.tumblr.com, and I answer them for you in this video format. Or if you go to Inventory Management, my podcast catch-all feed on iTunes, or inventorymanagement.simplecast.fm, you can download the podcast version of this and other audio bits and things that I put out, I don't know, into the world, because it's a thing I can do. It's Sunday night as I'm recording this. I'm having a beer, partially because I'm about to watch a new Fast and Furious film. I recently ordered the box set. Have not seen any of those movies before, but I'm trying to watch all of them in, well, now they run up. Fast and Furious 7 came out this weekend, and I feel left out. And they also seem like movies that I would think are awesome, so I have been slowly working through them, or I guess quickly working through them. I'm in through 2. I'm going to watch the third one before I go see My Brother and Me, the live version of Justin McElroy and Griffin McElroy and some other McElroy. They do dating advice, and they're doing some live shows, and so they're doing one in Chicago. So my wife and a friend of ours are all going out tonight to see that. It's going to be hilarious. If you've never listened to their podcast before, I highly recommend it. It's an irreverent dating show in which the advice may not be useful, but you'll enjoy it. So why don't we get right to brass tacks and get to your questions, starting with Dad is Mad, which I feel like I should start awarding folks that have fantastic usernames, and that Dad is Mad here. Cheers to you. That is a great internet username. So Dad is Mad asks, Jeff Gerstmann showed some fine Bloodborne skills as he apathetically played through Central Yarnum on a recent Unprofessional Friday. Folks that maybe aren't aware of that, that's a Friday series on Giant Bomb, if you're a subscriber, in which everyone kind of brings something to play, and they play it for an audience. Are there any games you don't particularly care for, but are more proficient at playing through? I'm trying to think of games that I don't care for. I'm not really into fighting games, so I don't know if I'd say I don't care for them, but they don't really do anything for me, so I guess I don't care for them. I don't know if I would go as far as to say I'm good at fighting games, but it wouldn't surprise me that, you know, if we break down this specific instance in which Jeff is a fan of fighting games, I do think a lot of the flow and the design logic behind fighting games probably translates skill-wise to Bloodborne or a Souls game. So, you know, it's sort of like patience, waiting for an opening, long animations, like all of those are totally part of fighting game design. So the idea that Jeff would be able to pick up on that and be relatively successful is not a huge surprise. But I can't. There aren't a lot of game types that I don't like. I tend to not be good at. I can't think of any particular one that I don't care for, yet somehow my skills translate to. I'm trying to think. Like, I don't really. I don't think I have an example that follows up sort of like what you're mentioning here with Jeff. Types of games that I don't care for, simulations are not something that usually grab me, so people get really like wild about the SimCity games and other types of sim games, and those have just never really done anything for me. But I also wonder if those are kind of like what open world games used to be like for me, in which open world games I used to quote unquote not care for because I sort of set them aside as a type of game that was like, make your own fun. Like, here's a million things to do. Go find the fun. And that just seemed like, hey, no, I'm here to help guide me towards what's interesting and compelling about your game, as opposed to letting me do that. Then I played Fallout 3. Then I played Skyrim. And now I totally love games like that and understand why that different approach works and isn't necessarily make your own fun as much as allowing players to organically discover elements of a world in a way that is less scripted and less hand-holdy. And so I wonder if Sims are the same way for me, right? Like, is there the right Sim for me that allow that kind of series to click? You know, strategy games didn't make sense for me until I played XCOM. Then XCOM let me love Fire Emblem. Then Fire Emblem let me love Shadowrun. Then Shadowrun is going to let me love all sorts of other games. So, you know, I think it may be that, you know, a lot of times with these genres that we write off, it may not be that they're not for us as much as we just haven't found the game that makes it for us or allows us to understand why people enjoy them. Anonymous asks, how about the Nintendo Direct, Fatal Frame 5, and apparently 2 new Fire Emblems? The rest is just gravy. Hell yeah, man. When the screen started going all staticky, I was like, does that mean we're getting Fatal Frame? Is it possible we're about to get Fatal Frame? and they announced Fatal Frame. So I suspect we're not getting Fatal Frame 5 until much later this year. It'll probably be a September or an October game. But just to know that Nintendo is not going to ignore the Fatal Frame franchise yet again, despite the Fatal Frame franchise being dedicated to their machines for the last 5-6 years. The last major installments have been Nintendo focused, and yet Nintendo of America has pretended the franchise does not exist. So I don't even know if Fatal Frame 5 is any good, but man, it does provide me a great incentive later this year to potentially play through the Fatal Frame games. I don't know if playing all of them is worth it, but I wanted to play through 2 again. I did a little bit of that on Spookin' with Scoops over at Giant Bomb before I left that site to kind of do my own thing and come to Kotaku, but maybe that would be an opportunity to go back and see what that is all about. And 2 of Fire Emblems. Man, how great is that? So the next Fire Emblem's not coming out until next year. They didn't really give a time frame on the, was it Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem or whatever they're calling that goofy game. I have a feeling neither of those are coming this year. So, yes, it's exciting to be getting ready for more Fire Emblem, but I think we probably should be tempering our expectations on when exactly we're going to get to play either of those. But in the meantime, I never got around to playing the Shadowrun expansion. I think like the Hong Kong one. Wasn't there another one? I can't remember. There was a Shadowrun expansion that came out that I heard was fantastic, and they crowdfunded an additional expansion that I think comes out this summer. I need to play that, so plenty of strategy stuff to get into if you're into that. And if you didn't play Shadowrun, highly recommend it. Affin, did you ever play Lords of the Fallen? As someone that is really enjoying Bloodborne and Dark Souls, I'm wondering if I should try it. I didn't. I have sort of heard that Lords of the Fallen is Dark Souls light, in which it takes a lot of the design elements of the Souls games, but makes it a little more approachable for a newcomer. I'm working my way through Dark Souls 2 at the moment, Sins of the Scholar. Sins of the Scholar? Sins of the First Scholar? I can't remember what the subtitle is. But anyway, I'm playing through the updated version of that, so I can check out the DLC and some of the updated enemy placements. So, if you hear all this talk of Bloodborne, of Souls games, and I do think Bloodborne is an interesting entry point into that franchise or that design philosophy, but Lords of the Fallen is also supposed to be a bit of an easier game. So, maybe that's something worth looking into if all the talk has got you interested, but you still find them to be slightly impenetrable. Mr. Redjar says, "You're right about Box Boy." He says that because I put out a tweet this past weekend saying it is an amazing game and I highly recommend it. So please do check it out. It's a lot like, kind of feels like the new Pushmo in a lot of ways. Not mechanically, but just a great puzzler that almost no one will play. It's lots of fun, but how strange that the game doesn't have any 3D at all. Is this the first Nintendo-made 3DS game that doesn't even have the option for 3D? That is a really great point. I noticed that as well, where I thought maybe I just had the 3D turned off, and then I flicked it back on, flicked it back off, and realized, oh no, there just is no 3D in here. I'm not really sure why they made that choice. It's a flat game with very simple visuals, so I suppose they thought there just wasn't a compelling reason to even add it, but 2D games also look fantastic in 3D, so I have to admit that I kind of miss it and wonder why they didn't implement it. And one of the things I wonder about a lot is someone that is not a huge fan of 3D in films, or at least I have not watched many films in which after seeing it in 3D, I feel as though I would miss something by not seeing it, or by not seeing it in 3D a second time around or a third time around. Whereas a number of games on 3DS, I feel like they would be lesser games. Still great games, but lesser games without the 3D. Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario 3D Land on the 3DS is a great example of that, in which the 3D helps you with the platforming and the level design is complemented, or the 3D complements the level design in a way that without the 3D, yes, it would still be one of the best platformers ever made, in my opinion, but that the 3D is a tangible addition to the game that I really enjoyed. I think 3D is kind of written off by a lot of folks as being sort of just a jokey gimmick to sell you more tech because there's nothing else to sell you at the moment. But I think with video games, it's a little bit different. I think Nintendo with the 3DS has proven that 3D can be a compelling, tangible addition to game design, and one that isn't just a flashy gimmick that makes weird things stand out in front of your eyes. I think it is. They have demonstrated a number of times that 3D is meaningful to video games, or can be. I don't think every developer is going to get it right. Nintendo's not necessarily gotten it right every time, but I have enjoyed it. And even a game like Majora's Mask, which was not made for that, but I thought was terrific, and I would have when I would flick the 3D off to kind of see what it was like, I missed the 3D. So I guess that's to a larger point of I get really nervous about what Nintendo's future hardware platforms are going to look like, because if they continue to do portable machines, are they going to get rid of 3D? Is that just something they're going to say we're not worrying about that anymore? Or do I at least get one more handheld from Nintendo where 3D is included, if only for the back catalog, but not necessarily for future games? I don't know. I'm definitely curious to see what they end up deciding in that direction. Just go play Box Boy. Anonymous asks, have you played Resident Evil Revelations 2 yet? I enjoyed it all the way through, despite some pacing issues, some weird The Last of Us copycatting, and the general budget feel of it, but the good ending might just make my favorite Resident Evil game. I wrote up episodic reviews for the 4 main episodes on Kotaku.com, so you can go back and check that out if you want to see my opinions of how that worked out. I thought Revelations 2 was okay. It's not great. I think some interesting elements. There's actually going to be, later today, there will be a podcast between me and Arcane level designer. I actually don't know what his actual title is over there, but he's a designer. He worked on combat anyway, Sean Elliott. He worked at Irrational on the combat for BioShock Infinite. He is now working on an unannounced project at Arcane, but that studio made Dishonored, and so hopefully he's working on Dishonored too. That would be, fingers crossed, what I would love to see him work on. He was a former journalist over at EGM and Computer Gaming World, which became Games for Windows Live, and we just had a conversation about Revelations 2 because he had played that game, had some thoughts about it, and he was like, "Hey, I just need an excuse to podcast. Can you facilitate this?" And I said, absolutely. So look for that on inventory management later today, or if you're listening to this on another day, it's already up there. And let us know if you want to hear more conversations breaking down the design of those games. I don't know if we're going to promise anything every week. He is a relatively new father and has his new job, so that's not going to happen. But hey, if you'd like to see us talk about games in the future, please let us know in the comments. Let Sean Elliott know on Twitter, @SeanElliott, and let me know. And maybe we'll think about doing some more of those. Feder Dave, the game I'm looking forward to most in 2015 is Arkham Knight. I'm a big Batman fan and have enjoyed the Arkham franchise tremendously so far. I even liked Origins, although it did have a few rough spots. At any rate, I know a lot of reviewers and other games, gamers, games folk, have knocked the post-Asylum titles for being more of the same. Is it really so bad to keep the same basic mechanics with refinements as long as we get new story, characters, etc.? Is it so different than, say, the Souls games? I think feelings on sequels can go a lot of ways. I would say that, Arkham Asylum to Arkham City is a pretty meaningful jump in terms of especially in scope, right? I mean, Asylum, although you discover all sorts of new areas and there's much more hidden to that space than you first get the impression of, it's a one main section, it's Arkham Asylum, and then Arkham City expanded that not quite to all of Gotham, but you had like this much bigger playground, and what is happening with Arkham Knight is expanding that even more, right? So what Rocksteady seems to be doing is keeping these sort of fundamentals the same, refining them, adding some wrinkles and to keep things fresh and to continue to iterate, but they keep expanding the scope of the world that you get to explore as a way of really changing up the approach there. I think it was funny, I was listening to Idle Thumbs, and Chris Remo talked about how part of the reason he had no interest or even knowledge that Bloodborne was coming out was because he just doesn't have a lot of interest in sequels to games he's already played and prefers new experiences rather than a remix or an update of a previous experience. And I can totally sympathize with that. I love sequels. I'm totally into sequels. I don't have a problem with them. I love watching developers find ways to improve upon an existing already great idea. I enjoy revisiting worlds and characters and approaches to games. That's okay with me, but I think Origins probably sticks out as a sore thumb in the Arkham verse. But I don't know. I haven't heard a whole lot of dissenting opinion on City. I think a lot of folks enjoyed that game. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I'd honestly love to see Rocksteady tackle some other franchises in the DC universe in the future, though my guess is that they're going to want to step away from comic stuff and try something different. I'd also love to see them do an original franchise, but we'll see. But I'm really looking forward to Arkham Knight, and we're like desperately close on that, which is really exciting because it's been delayed almost a full year. I can't remember exactly how that's worked out, but it's been a long time coming. So check the time on this. Cat Trigger, Ram or Chewy. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. So he's diving into Chicago politics. A quick aside, I don't know how many people will watch or listen to this or pay attention to Chicago mayoral politics, but the short version would be that I think Ram has been far more specific in his plans for the city, and that he is hardly a perfect mayor, not a particularly great leader, but he is a guy that gets a lot of things done, and there are a lot of problems with the city, and his opponent, we'll just call him Chewy because that's a cute name, and I don't know how to actually pronounce his last name. You've caught me kind of flat-footed in that regard. Seems to have been a little bit vague and wants to placate everyone in a way that I just don't think is reflective of the financial situation in Chicago and Illinois writ large. Anonymous asks, you said you don't think procedurally generated horror works. What about games like Alien Isolation, where the horror is AI-driven rather than scripted? Isn't that the same? Have you played Monstrum on Steam? It's a procedurally generated horror game that has a monster hunting you like Alien Isolation. I'd be interested to know if you think it works as a horror game or not. I will mark that down as a game to check out. I want to do a horror stream this week, so maybe Monstrum will be one that we dive into. So, you know, that comment comes from a video that went up last week for a game called, I can't remember. I'm going to look it up now, but pulling up my YouTube channel. Hector. And Hector is a procedurally generated horror game, which is to say that the maps are randomly generated when you enter into the space. And so you may encounter similar things to other players, but the puzzle pieces are moved around in a way that they're hoping to promise a wholly unique experience every time you boot up the game. And so I probably painted with too broad of a brush when I said that procedurally generated horror games don't work. I think entirely procedurally generated horror games tend not to work, and that procedurally generated or randomly generated elements when put into a horror game can be fantastic, right? Because that's how a lot of, like, when you discover that the way the alien works in Alien Isolation is not that he's always hunting you, but that the alien is just randomly planted and can, like, jump around. Like, there are ways that people have observed that the alien just sort of pops and disappears from the world sometimes. It's not an enemy that is actually winding its way through all sorts of piping systems when you don't see it. And that's an instance of a random element of the game being governed by a certain amount of rules that makes the experience feel fresh and unique, right? So I think that works. I think that's that instance in which a random element enhances the experience and makes every player have a slightly different experience as a result. So I think that it can work a couple of ways, right? Like, there are some horror experiences that are purely scripted, right, in which there's very little opportunity for deviation because they have a certain way that they want you to encounter things, a certain way to react to things, and that's pretty key to eliciting emotion, right? Like, part of eliciting emotion, at least in our traditional way of doing that, if you're taking lessons from other mediums and what they've accomplished, is by stringing the viewer or the player or the reader along in a very specific set of motions, whereas games allow the player to break that. And so writing random elements can be interesting in finding a way to compensate for that, right? So if you can't guarantee the player does X, maybe the random elements allow that to appear in a similar fashion, but more as a reaction to what the player is doing rather than hoping the player goes along a very specific path. But a really interesting question, one that I agree I was possibly too brash on. But Hector is a bad game. Kay Hanimus, hey Patrick, just wondering what your plans are for E3. Is Kotaku planning on sending you to all the conferences as per tradition? Will Kotaku be holding their own way of commenting on the shows, or do you think you'd be able to join in with the Giant Bomb guys like last year and watch it live alongside them? I don't know what my plans are for E3. I think it is unlikely that I would be granted an opportunity to go hang out with all the Giant Bomb crew, if they would even have an outsider come and do that with them for the day and a half of those press conferences. I really enjoyed that. It's my favorite way of handling those press conferences in between wanting to get something out of them while also wanting to entertain the audience and have something going on while these announcements are occurring. More than likely, the two things that will happen are that I either go to E3 and cover it from the show, or I am part of the home team that is handling the news coverage from, well, probably a room like this in the future. If I do end up going to E3, I have every intention of going on the E3 live shows if they'll have me, and what exactly those plans will be, how that's going to pan out. I don't know because we're still a little ways away from E3, but as soon as I know, I will make sure and let you guys aware of what my plans are going to be. Last question. Let's go to one more. A lot of good ones here, but we'll hold them for next week. Anonymous asked, does the number of developers of a game change how you judge it? For example, does knowing only 2 people really worked on Fez make it that much more impressive and allow you to forgive more of its faults? Conversely, does knowing hundreds worked on Assassin's Creed Unity make it that much more disappointing since it had more opportunities for faults to be found and fixed in development? Thanks, Jeff, aka Space Bob. That's a really interesting question. I think what I want to say is that it doesn't impact it at all. But I have to imagine subconsciously that being aware that there are only 1 or 2 humans that worked on something does influence how you feel about it, how you react to it, in which if someone pulls off something especially amazing, the fact that it was only from the minds of 1 or 2 or a couple of people does in some way make it more impressive, even if that may not necessarily be fair to the smaller or bigger games. So, I wouldn't say it's part of my policy to consider that when I'm talking about a game or writing about a game or whatever the case may be, but I think it's impossible to say that it isn't a factor. One thing I will say in that regard, though, and something I try to be very careful about, is to not. So you bring this up a little bit, but not allow that to stop you from calling a spade, right? In which a game that's bad is bad, whether it was made by 1,000 people or made by a single person. Yes, when you call that game bad, there's no distribution of fault, right? There's one person who worked on this game, or whatever the case may be for a smaller scale team, in which there is more blame to go around because there's only a couple of people that worked on it. Or if blame might be, too strong of a word to even describe what we're talking about here, But then I think that's something that the press has failed at in the past. I've probably failed at that in the past, in which you sort of champion a smaller game and maybe overlook things because you're just excited about what they're doing and it's a smaller team. So isn't it great that they accomplished that? And I think it's important to have perspective and remember that money's money, right? And that people are spending their hard-earned dollars on these games. And although it may be in the grand scheme of things a greater accomplishment for a smaller team to pull off something, that doesn't mean it should be judged less harshly or more harshly than anything else. And so I think that's something to take into consideration, and also for the audience to hold people accountable for. Like if you notice inconsistencies in that regard, make sure and point it out, because I think that's something that sometimes we can get wrong, and I'm certainly guilty of that as well. But that is going to do it for 3 Beers Deep. Once again, this is if you were watching this on YouTube. There are all the video versions of this. And there's plenty of other stuff for you to check out on the channel. If you'd like to listen to an audio version of 3 Beers Deep, listen to my interviews, of which there haven't been any yet, but there'll be stuff coming in the future, you can go to Inventory Management on iTunes. If you use other podcast applications or want to not use any podcast applications, you can go to inventorymanagement.simplecast.fm, which you can get an RSS feed that you can dump into other podcast applications, non-iTunes, to your Android phones, your Windows phones. You also stream the episodes there, and you can download them. So if that is more interesting to you, make sure and head over to inventorymanagement.simplecast.fm. If you have questions for me, do it at patrickklepek.tumblr.com. And please comment. Please let people know about this channel. Please let people know about this podcast. Review it on iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube. That all helps me in the future to do more of this stuff. So see you guys next week.